Hi, my name is Xena, and this piece came out of a free write that my mentor, Jeanne, in one of our pair sessions. Often we meet at a coffee shop to work and talk about writing, and sometimes our surroundings inspire what comes out on the page. This is a personal narrative / memoir, don't really know the difference sometimes, and it's called Taunting Little Jar of Sugar. On Fridays when I'd come home from school, I'd straight away take a shower, eat, and do my homework. I wasn't a goody two-shoes or anything. I rushed to get my homework done because early on Saturday mornings, my mom would pick me up to take me to her house in the Bronx. I grew up in Washington Heights with my adoptive parents, but on the weekends I'd sleep over at my biological mom's house. She'd come up and chat with my mom for about 20 minutes while I scurried around finishing my packing. I packed enough for a week, even though I was only staying until Sunday afternoon. On our journey to her house, I'd usually fall asleep. However, our first pit stop, the deli, is where I'd wake up for my ritual bagel with cream cheese and jelly and an orange juice. Then we'd keep on our way to her house and eat our breakfast in the car. When we'd get to her house, we'd sit on her humongous bed all day and just watch movies. If it wasn't time for lunch, but I was hungry, we'd get up and make our way to the kitchen, where she'd make me a cappuccino. I'd sit at the kitchen table while she worked her magic. There was this clear jar filled to the brim with sugar on the middle of the table. The jar and I would have a staring match. I knew I wasn't allowed to eat sugar, but the jar would just beg me to. The longer I stared at it, the bigger it seemed to get. While my mom's back was still turned, I'd lick my finger, put it in the pot, and eat the sugar. I got 2 or 3 licks before she'd turn around, spot me, and tell me, "If you keep eating that sugar, your teeth will rot." Then she'd go back to making the cappuccino, and I'd ever so slowly dip my pruned finger into the jar again, praying she wouldn't turn around. Finally, she'd be done. Sometimes my finger would have little crystals of sugar making their way to my mouth as she plopped my mug of cappuccino and whipped cream in front of me. She'd kind of frown at me, but then I'd give her a smile knowing it got her every time. I'd polish off my finger and put whipped cream on my cappuccino as she set out the cheese and crackers that always came along with the snack. Now when I order coffee, it makes me think back to those Saturdays with my mom. But the cappuccinos at coffee shops don't taste the same. It doesn't taste right until I dump about 10 packets of sugar into it. I don't think I'll ever find a cappuccino that tastes as good as the ones my mom would make me.
Not long after we moved from coastal Maine to Ann Arbor, Michigan, I went over to my grandma Annette's house one August morning. I sat in her living room and waited for her to turn down the volume on the Weather Channel. I didn't need a meteorologist to tell me his prediction for the forecast. I knew with great resign that more hot and possibly humid weather was to come, with no sea breeze in sight. Unlike Maine, there was no ocean in Michigan. But I didn't say that. Instead, I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, wondering what to talk about with the grandmother I'd grown up so far away from. I was 13, and until then, I'd known her only on vacations and over long-distance phone calls. "Gray does nothing for your complexion," she began. I heard her pick on my parents, but she'd never turned her critic's eye on me. I looked down at my flat chest and the gray t-shirt with the University of Michigan logo emblazoned over my heart. In my private, ongoing attempt to figure out what were the right clothes to wear in this new landscape, I bought 5 t-shirts with different variations of the university's logo on them. My clothes I could change, but my pimply face I could not, and I felt worse about that than anything else. "I have the same shirt in blue," I offered, fighting back tears. "Would that be better?" "Much," she nodded. "It'll bring out your eyes." Quickly, I learned that the best way to keep her criticism at bay was to wind her up with questions, sticking to topics she could hold forth on. She knew how to dress, and being French, she knew food. Back in the 70s, she'd served as restaurant critic for the local paper. By the time I was a teenager, she'd long since given up her post, but she still liked to pick me up and take me out to lunch. Since I didn't have any friends yet, I obliged. Always she arrived wearing a silk scarf tied round her neck. She carried a black Coach bag, which she was constantly checking for her keys and reading glasses, one or the other of which had inevitably gone missing. As she drove, she stated the well-rehearsed facts of life. Every woman should own a Coach. You know, there are some things that plain old white bread is perfectly good for: grilled cheese, a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, and her favorite topic, pork. You can't get a decent pork chop anymore. They took out all the fat. My eyes were on the road since hers were not. The health department came around and scared everyone to death, telling them that fat is bad. But fat's not bad. Fat is where the flavor is. College was my ticket out of town. By 18, I knew only 2 things: that I wanted to live in New York and be a writer. When I graduated from Sarah Lawrence 4 years later, my mind became frantic with a singular quest. Now that I finally lived in the city of my own choosing, how would I get paid by the word? I took a job in the ad sales department of an art magazine, but I wasn't writing yet. When I told people that's what I wanted to do, they asked me what my beat was. My beat? I didn't know what my beat was. You know, is there anything you're an expert on? A coworker asked. I came up blank. I was only 23. I hadn't lived long enough yet to have any expertise. The art magazine was going belly up, so I took a temp job for the summer. After that, I happened to do a gig as a fact checker for a food magazine. Suddenly, I found myself in meetings where top-tier editors argued about the optimal fat content in butter as tirelessly as my grandma Annette had taken up her mission to find just the right old-fashioned kind of pork chop. Based on the opinion she'd imbued me with, I found I had much to contribute in the edit meetings. Food writing, I realized, was a career, and it so happened my grandma had been grooming me to become an expert in just that. I still hear her when I'm shopping the sales rack. Gray does nothing for your complexion. I think better of the sweater than I'm considering and put it back. After she threw out a line like that, she often backtracked, "Oh, you know I'm just kidding." It didn't sound that way. But now I think maybe she really didn't mean it as criticism. Maybe she saw something in me that I couldn't express then. I felt bad about the way I looked, and even though I hadn't said so, maybe she understood. Maybe she'd felt that way about herself when she was young, when she didn't know how to fit in, try as she might. When I looked up from my shirt in that moment of being struck, I met her eyes across the room. They were the same shade as my own. Maybe she had just been speaking from experience. A blue shirt would bring out their color. Maybe she just thought she was being helpful, her own way of saying that, in fact, she loved me very, very much.